Hello and welcome once again to Intro to Computer Games and Simulations here at Lorain County Community College. I am Mike Substelny, your instructor this semester, and this week we are back in the book Game Design Workshop. We will be working in what is in the third edition, Chapter 10 on functionality, completeness, and balance. Let's get straight into today's lecture. In a previous lecture, we said that playtesting was the best practice we have for finding out what is fun and what is not fun about a game. We have our playtesters play our games, and we ask them some questions, and we observe them, and such like that, as we covered before. Today, we're going to deal with how to accept the feedback from them, what we should do when we get information from our playtesters when we observe them and such. You've got to understand this is a very abstract chapter. There won't be a lot of concrete examples, but having done the playtesting exercise in class, I hope you will be able to digest this and understand how useful it is. Okay, the author of the book, Fullerton, suggests breaking down the analysis of playtesting into some discrete phases because a game is a complex system. And you're not going to be able to fix everything in your game all at the same time. Well, what things should you be testing for when you play test? Here are those phases suggested by Tracy Fullerton. She says you should test for functionality, you should test your game for completeness, and you should test your game for balance. Let's find out what those elements are. First, you ask yourself, is the game functional? You try to get this from your playtesters. You've got to recruit playtesters who have never seen the game before for this phase of it. You have to watch them play the game from start to finish, and that can be time-consuming for certain games. And if the players are able to complete the game with no input, not one single hint from you, then congratulations, you can call your game functional. They can get all the information they need to finish the game from the game. If your playtesters get stuck and can progress no further, then your game is not functional and you're in trouble. A game is not functional until at least some players are able to complete it. Of course, there may be more to it than that. One problem is the players may run into a case that is not covered by the rules. They may not know what to do at a certain point in the game. This goes for a board game or a computer game. If the players argue about the rules because something is vague or not well defined, you have a problem. If the players can reach an impasse where it is impossible for them to progress because of dispute between the players, then you have a problem. You think that doesn't happen so much in computer games, but it could happen in online games. Another completeness problem. If the players discover a way to always win the game, as in if you've got a dragon that can spew limitless fireballs and you have no babies to worry about in evil clutches, then all you have to do is keep spewing fireballs forever, and the player will be immortal and rack up points forever and ever and ever. Here's an example to think of that you're probably all familiar with. It's called spawn camping. The problem is that characters have to enter the field of play somewhere, right? So what's wrong with a game that allows one player to kill another player as they appear on the field of play? Some people say there's nothing wrong with that. If the rules of the game permit it, then you should be able to do it. But the question is a game that allows that a complete game? Well, it's got kind of an element in it that lets one player always win. It's got an element in it that lets the other player never make any progress further in the game. That might be considered an incomplete game, but some players don't consider it incomplete. Here are some other completeness problems. Loopholes in the game. This goes to some of the things we talked about before, like abuse of the lamb in the game Deus Ex. The light attack munition in Deus Ex is supposed to be a weapon. It's a bomb that you can attach to a wall, and it will go off at some time after you attach it. Players discovered that when this thing is attached to the wall, you've got a brief period of time when you can use it to climb over the wall, and you can reach parts of the game map never intended by the game designers. You were never, ever supposed to be able to get to certain points on the map. But the game allowed that. Fullerton would view that as a completeness problem. Some people would call that emergence, playing a game a way that was never intended by the designer. So since it's not intended as a climbing tool, it's intended as a weapon, it caused a problem in that game. Let's talk about some other completeness problems you may discover. There may be dead ends in your game. Yes, it's possible to finish the game, but if a player makes a certain decision, they will be trapped and never, ever, ever be able to complete your game. That could be considered a completeness problem. If the player has no way out, never can get out once they've made a certain decision, is that a complete game? Wow. Some of your playtesters may think not. You have to understand that in these cases, completeness is a judgment call. It's a lot like fun. Is the game complete? Is a lot like, is the game fun? Human judgment has to determine that. You, as the game designer, can call your game complete at any point. If you're perfectly okay with your players getting trapped at a certain point, if you're perfectly okay with one player being able to spawn camp and play infinitely and succeed infinitely while the other player is never able to make any progress, if you say that's complete, then it is complete. And your customers, your players, will judge you on that decision you've made. All right. For example, they decided that climbing on lambs is not a bug. After players discovered it, they left it there and let players keep doing it in Deus Ex. Now, many games are never truly complete. Some online games are constantly adding content. And you'll notice that Farmville and that whole series of games always has beta written underneath it. They always tell you you're playing a beta. Don't expect more than that. Next question to ask. Is your game balanced? The first way you explore that is, does the player's experience meet the goals you had for the player's experience? Well, you could balance for skill. Do the starting positions give one player an unfair advantage? Identical starting positions indicate a symmetrical game. You're going to get a chance to deal with this when you create the game Tank War later on in the term, where you decide on what starting positions the player should have. As described in your textbook, Tank War does give identical starting positions, and so it is a symmetrical game. You could create an asymmetrical game without identical starting positions if you so choose. Backgammon, for instance, is a symmetrical game where the players start out in identical positions. Basketball would be symmetrical in that you have the same opportunity to catch the opening tip-off. Asymmetrical starting positions may give one side an advantage over the other side. And you've probably seen lots of games like that, generally zombie attack games. Oh, I wish I had a picture of the new game Zombicide, which has a bunch of humans against a horde of zombies. That's a great looking game. Many tactical simulations intentionally create asymmetrical starting positions, where you have one hero played by the players against hordes and hordes of enemies. We had the asymmetrical, unadvantaged situation with that battle we talked about between the Bismarck and the Hood in World War II, because they are intentionally trying to simulate something that really happened. Almost never in real history do you have a battle or an event that is perfectly balanced so that either side has exactly the same probability of winning. So when you're simulating something that really happened in real history, it's generally going to be unbalanced, and you'll have to do something about that. You have to think about what variables you can change. In Evil Clutches, you can change the rate of fire of the fireballs. You can change whether or not there is something that shouldn't be shot, like the babies in Evil Clutches. In Popsicle Rescue, if any of you might not have played that since you did the playtesting thing. That's a game I made that has all kinds of problems, but you're welcome to try that if you want. It's available in Angel. I balanced it by allowing the player to shoot only 2 diamonds at a time to destroy the ghosts that are coming at you. You can balance with game dynamics, for example. If you were making Super Rainbow Reef and you make the character of Ketch take up half of the screen there, that's going to change the balance of the game. It will be considerably easier to succeed in the game with a gigantic Ketch, as opposed to the regular sized Ketch, which the game was intended to have. Now, dynamic balancing problems can come from the ability to have super objects in the game, power-ups that are incredibly, incredibly powerful, or combinations of objects that add up to something incredibly powerful, as you could run into when you create your version of Wingman Sam. Let's also talk about relationships. Let's imagine a different version of chess. Suppose if a player takes an opponent's piece, then he or she gets another move, kind of like in billiards. What effect would that have on the game of chess? Think about that for a second. Well, the game would end quickly. If it's as soon as I took a piece, I get another move, you don't get a counter move. And if I take another piece, I get another move, you don't get a counter move. It's going to reach checkmate very, very quickly. That will change the balance of the game tremendously. The first player to take a piece would essentially be the winner of the game. That would still be a game, though. Would just be balanced differently. And it would probably be a whole lot less fun. For both players, the winning player and the losing player would probably enjoy it a lot less. Let's talk about power-ups and dominant objects. You can balance the strength of a super-duper object, like the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, with vulnerability or scarcity. The One Ring both makes Frodo very vulnerable, and it's also an extremely scarce object. It only exists one place in the entire Lord of the Rings universe. In Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator, you have a wide variety of weapons you can choose from. Here's a player ship being chased by a horde of enemy ships. So that's balanced by the player ship facing overwhelming numbers of enemies, but has a super weapon in that it can have a nuclear bomb. The nuclear bombs are scarce. It takes 10 minutes to make a nuclear bomb in game time, but it's extremely powerful, and it helps to keep that game balanced. If it only took a few seconds to make nukes, then it would be an awfully unbalancing super weapon in the game. Now, balance can reinforce character. Oh, we've got a video here from Borderlands. So the character can be defined by certain characteristics that the character has. And you can see each of these characters in this game has their own super abilities and their own vulnerabilities that they bring into the game. I invite you to play this to find out more about that. You've probably experienced this before, and by knowing what is strong about the character and what is weak about the character, that character's personality is reinforced and made real for the player. All right, and we're going to move on to asymmetrical objectives. Asymmetrical objectives. In this Battlestar Galactica board game, could you really have fun with that scenario I set up with 2 Vipers fighting 6 Cylon Raiders? Or with the Hood fighting the Bismarck in World War II when it's completely unbalanced? Well, it all depends on the objectives that the game designer creates. When you've got this situation with 2 Vipers versus 6 Raiders, suppose the humans in the Vipers can win if one of those Vipers is able to escape off the edge of the map, not dead. And the Raiders, the bad guys, only win if they absolutely destroy both Vipers. The Vipers don't have to destroy anything to win. They just have to escape the map. The objectives are completely asymmetrical, and that gives kind of different goals to both sides and the ability to win to either side. All right, in Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator, they have asymmetrical abilities and objectives. The player has a faster ship with the objective of defending itself and its bases, while the enemies, which are overwhelming hordes, have the objective of just destroying the player and the player's supporting units. And the player also has those stronger weapons, the nukes that I was talking about, to help balance that. All right, we're closing in on the end here. Another asymmetrical objective that is popular in games such as Plants vs. Zombies, the ticking clock. With the ticking clock, the player wins simply by surviving for a certain period of time. If you can make it through a wave of zombies, you have won that wave just by surviving. All right, that's it for this time. Next time, I'm hoping we will have a guest lecture by Tom Robertson, who will answer your questions and tell you the stories about his life in the computer games industry. He's had a long career of successes. He knows where all the bodies are buried. I'm sure you will enjoy meeting him. So until Tom is here next time, this is Mike Substelny signing off for Intro to Computer Games and Simulations from Lorain County Community College.